All right. Hello, 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 everybody. So, we are teaching your teen to break through bias today, which I am really excited about because this topic is, oh my gosh, it is such an important topic. I wish every parent would go through this training because here's the reality that we're all facing these days. There is so much fake news, fake information, false information, bias across the board these days. And I know everybody knows that that's watching this. I mean, we know these things, but what we don't think about all the time is our kids. Like we know this as adults because we grew up through eras before all the crazy technology and all the things. But now we have a whole generation of kids that that's all they know. All they know is whatever's online and social media is truth. And so now we have a whole generation of kiddos that unfortunately fall for a lot of things. They've become very gullible. They believe everything they see or hear, and it causes all kinds of issues, right? It causes all kinds of dramas and they take things more personally. They're just hearing all this stuff. And it's so this is such a great topic that I think we need to talk about more. So I'm really excited to be training and doing this with you all today. So let me share my screen and we'll get started. All right, there we go. So breaking through bias. So for those of you that don't know me, I am Tracy Baconhaster. I own Adulting University. I equip homeschool families to effectively prepare their teens for adulthood. So that whole life after high school, that's what we do. We do that through live courses, self-paced curriculum, text-based support, coaching, all kinds of things. So we have lots of great resources and tools to help families. Some of them are very, very, very cost-friendly, and some of them are a little more of an investment. It just depends on kind of what level of support you would like for your kiddo, but we help do all those things. So before we really dive into the how to help your teenager, we need to first understand bias and false information. So bias is a tendency for somebody to favor one side, perspective, or group over others in a way that is unfair or misleading. And let's be honest, we all have bias, right? We all show bias, we all share bias. It is the world that we live in. When it comes to bias, like we all have our own biases. And unfortunately, in today's economic and political world that we live in, it's gotten even worse. I feel like bias has become extreme where we even go to the links now of like, oh, well, you don't agree with me and you don't have this, so I am not even going to associate with you. And so we've let actual biases ruin relationships, ruin other things. And I think that's something that it's really sad, but it's something that is very, very present. The other one is false information. So this is any content that's incorrect, misleading. It's not based on facts. Often it's spread intentionally, sometimes unintentionally, but a lot of times it's spread intentionally to get people to believe it or fall for it or whatever that might be. And so this is really important because our kiddos sometimes don't understand this. They don't really understand what bias is, what false information is. They might understand like a lie, like what a lie is, but they don't understand that false information exists in things that maybe they don't even think it would exist in, like areas that are supposed to be reliable or supposed to be, something they can trust in. So when we look at that bias and that false information, there are multiple places this tends to show up in information. So social media is huge, especially for our youth. If they are spending any time on social media, they are constantly encountering bias, fake information, lies. I know the Olympics are going on right now and the amount of posts that have been going through and people, nobody fact checks anymore. They just see it and believe it and spread the word of it. And so, I mean, it's really hard when that stuff happens. We see it in the news, which to me is heartbreaking because the news used to be like, hey, here's the news. Here's what's going on. Here's what's happening. Those were the things that was what the news was for, right? The news was to help people understand what was going on, to spread facts and information. And unfortunately, that's not the case these days. So websites and blogs are also another area that we see this bias and false information, right? Websites used to be like, if it was a .org or a .gov, it used to be pretty trustworthy and pretty reliable. And unfortunately, again, that's not the case anymore. Advertisements, oh gosh, we all know that there's bias and fake information in advertisements. Emails, right? We can get that from spammers and other things where they're trying to spread information that's not accurate. Forums and discussion boards, which this can be really tricky because a lot of people go to these places like Reddit and other places to get information. I mean, even like Wikipedia, right? Those are places we just go, but they're not always reliable, right? Sometimes that is bias that's there. Sometimes it is false information. Influencers, again, with our teenagers, this is so important because they see something online. Like I know my son, I'll tell that story here in a little bit. He likes to watch some of the gaming videos on YouTube or watching other people play games, right? And oh, they have big followings, they're popular, they're famous, right? Whatever it is. So they're like that influencer person. And so they believe them. Our teenagers are like, oh, well, I saw this person. I saw Taylor Swift do this, or I saw this person do this. So it must be true. It must be accurate. And that's not true. Political campaigns, oh my gosh, don't even get me started on those. I don't even like to watch those during campaign years. I don't care what side you're on. All of the political campaigns are full of bias, full of false information. They're all about trying to make each other look like crap and all these things. And there's probably some truth underlying in the things, but I just can't even take it for face value anymore. But these are all areas that our kids are exposed to and are seeing that contain this bias and this false information. And so we really need to be aware of this for our kids and for our youth, of understanding, hey, like this is what you're going to be encountering. So that's our topic for today. And here's what can happen, right? When our teenagers aren't able to identify bias or identify false information, which I will tell you a good chunk of them, they're not able to do this. I think a lot of parents, we feel like, oh yeah, our kid knows this stuff. They don't. Even our kiddos who are really gifted and really smart, that might be like, oh man, they're really good. They still fall for this stuff because they just don't know it exists because they're so surrounded by information. But what happens a lot of time is teens start to make poor choices, right? Based on inaccurate or misleading information, which can affect their academics and even their personal life, right? If they're starting to make bad decisions because of information they're seeing online because they thought it was true, like that's not good, right? If this is maybe where your teen might be, drop decision for me in the chat. So say, hey, your kiddo has made some poor decisions from stuff they've seen online that they thought was real, like see those challenges, right? The Tide Pod challenges, all the horrible things, right? But drop decision in the chat for me if that's kind of your kiddo. Academic challenges is another one. Reliance on biased sources results in lower grades and hinders the development of critical thinking skills, right? If they are just like Googling things and just pulling the first thing that comes up and it's not a reliable source because they don't know how to find a reliable source, that can really start to impact their academics and other areas, right? If you're having them write papers or reports or understand how to do research, but they're not really understanding what's real and what's not real, that's going to cause issues. The emotional and social impact can be really big. So exposure to false information increases stress and anxiety because sharing that misinformation can cause damage in relationships, right? Think about back when, whenever you were in school, when you had friends, when we were teenagers, right? The drama and stuff that can sometimes happen. Oh, so-and-so said this, right? Think of the telephone chain. And then now by the time it gets all the way around, right? That whole thing it's not accurate anymore. It's not at all what that person originally said. And so this stuff can happen when we see bias and lies going around or false information, even in social groups, right? Even in your kids' co-op or in their club or their sports team. And if they don't go right to the source, they just take it for face value, it can cause them to damage relationships, right? On both directions. That whole manipulation exploitation, I mean, this is a big one, right? Especially online, right? Teens are more vulnerable to online scams, fraud, and extremist influences due to their inability to recognize misleading information. This is big. And this happens, I would say, more times than not. I mean, we see these teens that get lost with chat rooms or think that's their friend and they share information because, oh, it's my buddy, even though I've never met this person. Kids are more vulnerable online because they aren't able to identify bias or false information. They aren't able to identify if that person really is their friend or not because they've manipulated them, they've exploited them. And this can be really scary as parents, right? We don't want this for our kids. But that's the reality when our kids don't know how to do this stuff. This is what tends to happen for them. And then finally, reputation damage can happen. If your kiddo is posting or endorsing false information, that hurts their credibility. It can also really hurt their online reputation. It can damage their reputation with their friends, eventually at their jobs. There are some employers that are like, you can't post anything political or this, that, and the other because there's so much false information out there that we don't want you spreading those kinds of things. So again, just understanding when our kids don't know how to do this stuff, this is what can happen, right? This is what can happen to them. And as parents, we don't want any of this for our kiddos, right? We don't want them, having their friendships fall apart. We don't want them getting stressed and anxiety because they don't know what's right and what's wrong, right? They don't want you making bad decisions, all these different things. So, because what happens when your teen starts to experience those things, here's what they start to experience themselves. So they start to become uncertain about accuracy of their beliefs when confronted with conflicting information. And as parents, that's a big deal for us, right? We've raised our kids with certain values and beliefs and things. And if they're now questioning that because they got hit with something on the opposite side, because they're not sure if what they believe is real, if that's what they believe or this person believes is real, it can start to cause a lot of that for them. They start to get uncertain. They start to question themselves. That can hurt their confidence. They start to feel ashamed or self-conscious about having believed and possibly shared false information, right? They might feel silly or embarrassed about that. Like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I did that. I didn't know. And again, all that does is damage our kiddos' self-image and their confidence, and it's not a good place for them to be. So I'm going to get really upset or angry. This was my son. And again, I'll share that story here in a little bit. At those who spread that false information and at themselves for believing it, right? They get mad at themselves, they get mad at the person who spread the false information, and they just get angry, right? And that's, again, not a fun emotion to be in. And again, it just ties into all these other pieces because it usually goes from anger to feeling embarrassed to now not trusting anything, right? And sometimes they start feeling alone or disconnected, if they're faced with criticism or ridicule for their beliefs. And if they're not strong in their beliefs or values or understanding how, if it's real or not real, they're going to feel really disconnected from other people. And so it's important for them to understand how to do these things. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We have some good news though. So good news is we're here to help you, right? We're going to talk about this stuff today because when your teen is able to identify bias and false information, they make better decisions, develop stronger research and critical thinking skills. They're less likely to fall victims to scams, misinformation, and extremist influences, right? They have their own ability to determine information and what they want to believe and not. They'll be able to communicate more effectively and build more trust with others, which I think is also extremely important. And they'll be better prepared for adulthood when you aren't always around, because mom and dad ain't always going to be there, right? Eventually they're going to be on their own. They're going to have their own family, their own life. And we want them to be taken care of. We want them to have their own opinions, be able to come to their own conclusions. And so this is what we want for our kids, right? When they can learn how to do these things, this is what they're going to achieve. And then you as the parent, you get to see your teen growing into a self-assured and capable individual. Who doesn't want that, right? Tell me in the chat, like, yes, please. Like, I want my kid to be that self-assured and capable, right? And confident that your teen is ready to face future challenges and opportunities, right? That's a big deal. We want that for our teenagers, that they can face the world head on, that they're ready to go, they're equipped, they're comfortable, and they're going to take this on. And you can feel assured that your teen is safer online and in their social interactions, which is what we all want, right? I mean, it's scary with our kids being online with how much risk and bad things can be out there. We want them to be safe. So tell me again in the chat, if you want this for your teenager, say clarity. If you want this for you, tell me peace in the chat, right? Like we want this. We want our kids to have clarity and be able to have that independence. We want as parents to be at peace, knowing our kids are going to be okay and that they can recognize and navigate these things. Okay. So this is what we're going to talk about today, because at the end of the day, if you want your kiddo to be able to recognize bias and false information, they have to be able to think critically. So at Adulting University, if you watch any of our trainings, you see this is our model. We always have 4 pillars. And then within those pillars, we go into our foundational blocks that make up each pillar. But for today, we're talking about those 4 pillars of critical thinking. So for us, it is research, evaluating evidence, critical analysis, and decision making. If your teen is solid in all 4 of these pillars, what they're going to have, or what they're going to be, I should say, is a thoughtful, informed individual capable of making well-reasoned decisions and solving complex problems. Who does not want that for their kids? Hopefully none of you. I would like to think all of you are like, yes, I want my teenager to be thoughtful. I want them to be informed, and I want them to be able to make their own decisions that are well-reasoned and be able to solve complex problems, right? That is crucial for success as an adult, right? And so that's what we're going to talk about today. This is how we're going to go through this. But before we get into it, I always like to do a check-in to see where you currently rank. So I'm going to ask you to engage with me here in the chat. So even if you're watching the replay of this, please drop it in the comments, okay? Tell me in the comments. I want you to rate yourself because this is good for both of us. This is good for you to kind of do your own self-awareness check-in, see where you're at, where you feel like your teenager is, but it's also good for me to know where everybody is and where you feel like this. So I'm going to ask you to rate yourself from 1 to 4 on the next slide. I'm going to give you 3 different statements and I'm going to read them to you. And I want you to rate yourself in the chat. 1 being like 0 bad, like don't have this, don't know this. 4 being like success, positive, absolutely have this. We are good to go. Okay. So our first statement. I know my teen is able to recognize when bias is present in conversations, media, on the news, and other places. Tell me in the chat, 1 to 4, where do you feel like you fall in this? 1 being like, nope, my teen is not able to do any of this. 4 being like, yes, this statement is 100% accurate for me. So tell me in the chat where you feel like you are. And it's okay if you're on the lower end. Most of the time, that's the case, which is why we're here, right? We're here to talk about this stuff and to give you those tools. So again, just tell me in the chat where you feel like you are. Our next statement. I know my teen is able to recognize fake or false info in conversations, media, on the news, and other places. Again, tell me in the chat, 1 to 4, where do you fall? Again, it's totally okay if it's a 1 or 2. That is completely normal. No reason to be ashamed or embarrassed by that. That is normal, right? That's why we're here. And our last statement, I know my teen knows how to think critically and get to the truth using reliable information, be it online or in other places. So 1 being like, no, they don't know how to do this. 4 being like, nailed it, right? Okay, perfect. Yeah, so Ashley, thank you so much for engaging there in the chat with me. Yes, and that's totally normal, right? That's something that is very, very common, and that's why we are here to talk about this today. So we are going to go over our 4 steps to teach critical thinking. Because again, if we want our kiddos to be able to identify bias, identify false information, they have to be able to think critically, right? I can teach you, okay, here's how to identify bias and all the things. That gets really nitty gritty. What we need to teach our kids is the foundational piece, which is how do you think for yourself, right? How do you think critically? How do you do all these things to then come to your own conclusion? So then you can identify if it's bias or not. So it's kind of like, this is the first step on this journey. Like you have to have this before you can go any further. So these are our 4 steps. So number 1 is encourage questioning. 2 is analyzing information. 3 is develop logical reasoning, and 4 is decision making. And again, don't worry, we're going to go through each of these and I'm going to have you rate yourselves and all the fun things there too. But these are our 4 steps. So we can nail these with our kiddos. They're going to have solid critical thinking skills and they're going to be able to start to recognize bias and false information to really understand those things. So again, we're going to do scale of 4, 1 to 4. I'm going to read statements to you here in a second. I'll tell you when to do that. But for now, let's talk about, and I'll stop share for a second so I can, see you guys. So encourage questioning. So when we talk about questioning things, this is like that research phase, right? Our kiddos have to ask questions. This is right out of the gate why so many kiddos fall for bias and false information, because they just believe it. They don't have any questions about it. They're just like, oh, okay, my best friend said this, must be true. Or Taylor Swift said this, or I saw this online, so it must be true. We have to teach them to start questioning things. And not in a way of like, oh, I don't trust you questioning, just like, thinking, right? When we ask questions, it's because we're thinking, we're processing something like, did that really happen? Wow, like when did this happen? What happened, right? Starting to ask questions. We need them to know how to ask questions, because once they start to ask questions, that is when they can start to uncover the truth, right? They can start to see bias because they're going to ask a question and the answer is not going to be there, or that person can't give them the answer. So they're going to be like, okay, I need to go figure it out myself now. So let's rate ourselves on this. And again, I'll give you some examples here, but the questioning piece is crucial of understanding how, like what kinds of questions to ask. Like, is this real information? Is this fake information? Where did this information come from? Who said this? What's the original source, right? Helping them start to understand to ask questions. So again, rate yourself in the chat for me. 1 to 4. First statement is, my teen understands and knows exactly what type of questions to ask to determine if there is bias present in a piece of information. 1 being like, they do not know what to say. 4 being like, yes, they know exactly what to ask. And again, totally okay. So just tell me in the chat where you feel like your kiddo is with this, because that means it gets to be something we get to work on, right? We get to help them ask better questions and know what to ask to start to identify bias. Like those, think the, who, what, where, why, right? Like, where is this information coming from? Who said this information? Why did it come out this way? And then having them start to really dig into that. So again, tell me in the chat where you feel like you are. Our second one, I regularly encourage my teen to ask open-ended questions about the information they encounter. So this is something that we can do as parents. So tell me in the chat 1 to 4, again, totally fine. If you're kind of like on the 1 or 2 side, that's okay. This is why we're here, right? I'm gonna keep saying it because I want you to be okay with this. So 2 and 4, awesome. I love that. So that's great. So yeah, so they understand that encouraging them open-ended questions, because that's where it starts, right? Our teen's not going to know right off the bat how to ask questions or what to ask, but us prompting them saying, well, what do you think about this information? And then let them talk it out and be like, okay, do you, if you believe this is real, why do you believe this is real? And then having them start to explain it to you, and then try to start to, like, gently with love and questions, poke some holes in their theories, right? Like, oh, okay, so you believe this is true because blah, blah, blah. Tell me more about that. Why do you believe it's true because of that? Like, why does that thing make it true to you? And, or even just asking like, well, what about in this situation when this happened? That's, again, starting to, because you're not directly saying, well, that's fake, that's false information. You're letting them start to think for themselves and start to answer their own questions. A lot of times when we start to ask questions, the truth comes out, right? It comes out. And so this is that first step for sure with our kiddos, is that question asking. All right, again, we're going to rate ourselves. So our next one is analyzing information. So this one, I think, this one is hard for our youth these days. Thank goodness my homeschoolers are a little bit more apt to doing this kind of stuff, but unfortunately teens in general, because things are so easily at their fingertips with technology, they can do a quick Google search on their phone. They can even go to AI now and ask questions. But analyzing information, this is so, so important, because so many kiddos don't do this. They, again, take stuff at face value. They don't start to dig into it and understand where the source came from. Is it a reliable source? Understanding different types of bias that can happen, understanding the different types of things that can exist. It might be true information foundationally, but they've skewed it to fit an agenda or fit this topic or fit this, whatever it might be. So this is where, when we talk about analyzing information, it's teaching our teens to go deeper and actually do that research, right? We ask the questions, now it's the next step. Okay, now go find the answers, right? We ask questions, now go find the answers, and find those answers from credible sources. And they need to understand what makes a source credible. Okay, so let me share my screen again here for you. And let's see where we feel like we are right now, which again, totally okay if it's a lower score. So our first statement, my teen is able to evaluate the credibility of different sources and identify reliable ones. So 1 to 4, where you feel like your teen ranks in this. You feel like they're able to evaluate credibility, or are they kind of still struggling with this? And again, most teens are more on the 1 side, because again, there's so much information out there. It makes it really hard sometimes to understand what is credible and what's not. And again, when I grew up, and when, internet and all, I remember my school, like, I think it was elementary or middle school. And I remember my little country school and going on the computer, and it was like, oh, you're doing your research paper. Okay, well, .gov and .edu, those are the places you want to go. You can't do that anymore. I can go online right now and buy a domain name that's a .edu. I almost did for Adulting University, since we're kind of like that, but I was like, I don't want to trick people. So I didn't. But I could go buy that. I could technically probably buy a .gov. I don't know about the .gov, but even the .gov websites, some of those actual government websites, they have bias, they have false information. And so it's really hard sometimes to identify the truth behind things. So it's helping them understand what is credible, what is not. Just, finding something on Reddit or Wikipedia is probably not the best or most reliable option for kiddos, and helping them understand that. So yes, one, I appreciate that, Ashley, for being honest with us and talking to us about that. And then, so our next statement, I have taught my team to recognize and understand different types of bias in various forms of media. So again, where do you feel like you fall? You're like, yes, I've helped my team to understand bias and the different types of bias that exist, or four being like, or I'm sorry, four being that, or one being like, nope, I'm not really sure even myself what kind of biases exist, because there's a lot of different biases out there. This is like all kinds of things. It's not just bias in the sense of an opinion. It can be racial bias. It can be, there's so many, I can't even name them all right now, but it's helping understand your teenager understanding what type of biases exist, because sometimes a bias, it looks like fact and it's not because of how they word it, right? So helping them understand those things. Very, very important piece of that next phase, right? Question asking, and then now we're going and finding the answers and determining what's truth and what's not, what's somebody's opinion and what's fact, right? Facts and opinions. I don't know what happened to that, but facts and opinions were always a huge thing. And anymore in society, it's kind of just like every opinion's a fact, and facts don't really exist anymore. So we have to really watch that. I feel like as our society, it's kind of a hot mess. 4, love it. That's awesome. All right, so our next step, logical reasoning. So when we talk about logical reasoning, this is being able to reason what we found. So we questioned, we went and found information. Now we can sit there and actually analyze it and look at it and be like, okay, let's look at this information we gathered and actually start to identify if it's fact, if there is bias present, if there is, what is it? Is there an agenda being pushed here? Is there, what is going on in this conversation, in this information that we found, right? It's finding and evaluating the evidence is really what it is. And determining if it's a strong argument or not. It's that whole evaluation piece, right? We have to now evaluate all the stuff that we found. And sometimes this process can be quick and easy, and sometimes it can take a little while, right? When we do a research paper, this takes a while because we're going and finding tons of information and pulling it all together, right? We just go find all the research information first, then we bring it back together. Now we start to go through it, organize it, put the pieces together, figure out, what makes sense, what doesn't, what's good research, what's not. That's what logical reasoning is. It's understanding if it is valid or not. So our statements for this one. So number 1, my team can identify common logical fallacies in arguments and information they encounter. Fallacies. So this is something that when we look at a logical fallacy, these are things that, like, again, it's agendas. Is somebody twisting this information towards their own opinions or to convince somebody of something or to manipulate somebody of something? Is it true? Is it solid? Is it a solid logical fact? Is it a fact that's been skewed with a bunch of bias, right? So it's understanding that piece. So again, 1 to 4 can identify those common logical fallacies. And there are actually, I think, 10 different specific, like, named fallacies that people can utilize. So I'm not getting into all that today, but just so you're aware, if you want to do some Googling on your own, there are some fallacies that are very specific. And then this next statement, I help my teen understand the importance of evidence and logical reasoning in forming strong arguments. So 1 to 4, 1 being like, I don't really do a lot of this because, something I haven't thought about, of like having them build that strong evidence behind their case, or 4 being like, yep, every decision that they want to make or anything they want to bring to me, they are doing these things. And again, totally fine if you're on the lower end of the scale. It's very normal. We're, day to day, we're dealing with all the things and being mom and running the house and teaching the kids and doing all this stuff. Sometimes we don't always think of these pieces. So Sometimes we're right in the middle. So understanding that though, that it's something we can work on with our teenager, helping them to understand that evidence and a logical reasoning side when they have an argument, right? If they're like coming to you with something, cool, that's awesome. Back it up with evidence. Talk to me about it. I just did a recording with a friend of mine for an event, and we were talking a little bit about this. And I mentioned how my son, he's been trying to get me to let him play Fortnite. He's 11, and I'm just like, no, like we're not playing Fortnite. But what he did, and it cracked me up the first time he did it, is he actually did his own research and brought facts and information and kind of created his own little presentation. And he brought it to me to explain why he should be allowed to play Fortnite. And it was awesome. We had a great conversation from it. At the end of the day, I still was like, no, and here's my reasoning for why. And he understood that, and we had a great conversation. But I was like, that's a really good job. And I'm like, this is what you got to do. Because if, your kiddos, when they get in the workplace and they want to make a decision or make a suggestion to their boss, or they want to change a process or change how they do things or any of that, they have to like back it up, right? They got to support why they want to make that change, why they want to do these things. We have to do that with our spouses sometimes, right? I'm like, hey, honey, I want to do this. Or he's like, hey, honey, I want to do this. And I'm like, cool, why? Why are we going to do that? Can you explain it to me? Like, I need it to make sense before I accept this, right? And that's really what logical reasoning is. Does it make sense? So this is something we get to work on with our kiddos too, to kind of really help them in this critical thinking space. All right, our last step, decision making. So this is where we bring everything together, right? We've done the research, we've asked the questions, we've pulled all the information together, we've started to analyze that to say, does this make sense? Does it not make sense? Does it something I agree with? And now we get to make the decision. Is this bias? Is this false? Is it truth? By going through that process. We can't just jump right to the space, right? We have to go through those other steps to get to here. Right? We have to have our teenagers go through the process of asking questions, gathering the information, evaluating the information, and then they can make a decision. And I encourage this with all of our kiddos and all of you guys that are watching this. Like, this is so important for our kids when they bring something to you that they saw online or their friend said, or they saw, even if it is in line with your guys' views, whether they're religious, political, doesn't matter. Still question it with them. Help them still go through this process, because they might come to their own conclusion. They might come to it and be like, you know what, after going through this, I don't believe this anymore, or this isn't accurate information, because and all of us are guilty of this. I mean, and I think this is a great example of it and a great time right now when we're in a political election, especially for a presidential election. The amount of information that's going around is insanity. A lot of it is not true. A lot of it is bias. And then there is some truth in some pieces there. And again, regardless on what side, I'm not trying to make this a political debate. Nothing like that. But the reality is, most people, regardless of which side they're on politically, don't take the time to do these things anymore. And we just don't. We all do, because we're like, hey, we're busy. We're doing all these other things. I'm not going to go and do my due diligence to really make sure this information is accurate. Even if I like this person, even if I plan to vote for this person, I should still go do my due diligence and look at information without my bias on and evaluate the evidence from facts and not opinions. And this is something we get to teach our teenagers, because this is so important, right? Having them go through this process to make a sound decision. And that's a decision they made, somebody else didn't make for them by manipulation and other things. So this is that final step, right? So we're going to, again, rate ourselves in the chat. Tell me where you are with this. So our first statement: my teen makes informed decisions by weighing the credibility and relevance of different sources. So 1 to 4, where do you feel like your kiddo is with this? So are they able to make informed decisions by understanding credibility and relevance of different sources, or are they not? And again, that's why we're here. We get to teach this stuff, and it's something we get to work on, which is fun for us. So the next one: I guide my teen in considering the potential consequences of their decisions based on the information they have. This is where we as parents get to come in and help them understand what happens when we believe this information. What happens if we take this and run with it without doing our due diligence, right? What are the potential consequences that can happen based on their decisions, right? This is so powerful as a parent that we get to bring this together because this is that decision-making process. Cool, you made a decision, but part of that decision-making is what are the consequences of that decision? What are the consequences if you believe this and it ends up being fake or wrong or inaccurate? What happens? Pros and cons, right? So I love that we get to kind of go through this process with our teens because this is powerful, right? This is where we want our kids to be. We want them to be able to go through this so that this stuff can happen. So imagine your teenager is able to confidently make well-informed choices based on accurate information. Imagine your teenager consistently uses credible sources and critical thinking skills to make decisions. Imagine your teen gains respect from peers and adults for sharing reliable information. And imagine them navigating the internet securely, avoiding scams and misinformation. And imagine that your teen tackles challenges with a logical and analytical approach. How would that feel if your teenager was able to do all this? How would that feel? And you can feel free to share in the chat. I would love to know. How would that feel for you as the parent knowing your teenager is able to do all these things? Does it make you feel good? Does it make you feel accomplished? Like, yes, I did a good job, right? Peaceful. Yes, yes, exactly, right? Like, oh my gosh, I don't have to stress and worry about my kiddo. I mean, at the end of the day, critical thinking and like this whole process, this is something that helps them in almost every area of life, right? Because we know they're going to take the time to really walk through this process to make good decisions. They're not going to always get it right? We all mess up, let's be honest, but those mess ups will be a whole lot less and a whole lot smaller than what they would be without this process, right? Instead of them just kind of jumping right into it or not thinking things through at all, right? So yes, peaceful. I love that. If you want this for your teenager, if you're like, yes, I would love for my teen to be in this position, tell me critical thinking in the chat. So which I, again, would like to think everybody's like, yes, this is where I want my teen, right? This is where I want them to be. So drop critical thinking in the chat if this is what you want for your kiddo. We want them to be critical thinkers. We want them to be able to make good decisions. Yes, yes. And that's a great point. Actually, I love this. So she said, I think a lot of time that kiddos are too lazy to do the research to make the decision. And I agree with you. And again, that challenge is because things are so easy that they don't want to take the time to go do those things. And so this is where we can try to motivate our teenagers, which we did a training on motivation. So I highly recommend checking that one out. But motivating our kiddos to say what's going to be in it for them, making it fun, right? Especially for our younger kiddos that are in that middle school age group where a lot of times the motivation is not always there. They're very like, against everything and life sucks and I hate everything, right? I don't want to do this. But helping them figure out, like making it a game almost like, hey, we're doing it with them. And maybe in the beginning, you're kind of not doing it for them per se, but walking through it with them. And maybe like they're sitting with you and you're going through the process yourself with them next to you. And then the next time something comes up, you're like, hey, let me sit here with you. And now we're going to have you do this. And let's go do some quick research, right? And read some stuff and figure some things out. It's making it fun and engaging, right? That's the key, because if they're like, oh, research, like it's not research, we're not doing research, right? Let's go check this out. Or, hey, let's watch this quick documentary on this or do this. And then like get them, do something that they're interested in first, right? If they love video games, okay, cool. Well, do you know when video games like were created? What was the first video game? Them just doing those searches, and then you could say, oh, cool. Well, where did you find that information? Can you talk to me about that? Can you share that? That's where that process can start to come into play, where you're actually teaching it to them without them even realizing it. And it makes it fun because it's something they care about. And then we can start to say, oh, well, so you found that on that website. Cool. Well, how do you know that website's a legitimate website? What if they're lying to you? And then they're going to be like, what? Right? Like, wait, what do you mean? What do you mean they're lying to me? Right? That's where those conversations can start to come in. And that's where we can start to do those things. So now we're teaching them these skills. And the more it's all about repetition and consistency, right? The more we do this kind of stuff with our kids, starting small, little things like that, bigger things, having them do, okay, in our English project this semester, we're going to have you do this and make it on something they're fun about, but it involves some research, involves them kind of analyzing stuff. Business props are great. So if they have any interest in entrepreneurship, this can be a really good tool for that. Because it's like, well, if you want to own a business, you got to do your research. You got to validate the idea. You got to do all these things. So there's ways to teach it and to get them to want to do those things. But starting with stuff that's easy, small, lower effort is the way to go, and then slowly build from there. But the more you do that, especially, I mean, if she's still in that younger age group, that's totally fine. You got plenty of time now where she's still there. She's got at least a couple years that she's still there. If you start doing this with her on a consistent basis, you're just ingraining that in her brain where she's going to start to do it on her own without even realizing that you taught her how to do those things, right? So that's where I would suggest kind of going with that and helping. So tell me, does that help you, Ashley, a little bit with? Okay, perfect. Awesome. Yes. Because it is hard sometimes to motivate our kiddos and get them to do things they don't want to do. And if they're like, oh, research, like make it not research. It's not research. We're not doing research. We're just like looking for some fun stuff online. We're just having fun online. So one thing I do want to show you, especially in the sense of critical thinking and bias and false information. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with our program, Adulting 101. This program, I like to just bring this program up for this specific reason because we teach this in there. We actually teach your teen this stuff. So sometimes it's easier on the motivation side for them to do the things when they are hearing it from somebody else. And we gamify everything that we do. So we do a lot of gamification in this program where students can earn points, they can earn prizes, they can, we get really fun. We do like daily challenges and prompts and stuff. But this is a full semester course that we teach live to teens that are homeschooled kiddos. And we go through all kinds of life skills topics and like practical life skills like finance and car maintenance to your more like soft skills like communication, decision making, critical thinking, those kinds of things. But we actually go through this and we actually do a fun activity in it where we do a bias and fake information activity where we actually walk them through, like we talk about what it is and all those things, and we have them actually like go do it. So we have all kinds of really fun activities in this, as well as tons of other topics that we teach on in here. But every week is dedicated to a very specific topic. We have class twice a week. And then we do stuff in between our classes during the week as well. So all the students are in a group together. So they get that kind of community. We'll have them do little group projects. I mean, it is very, very fun and very different than a traditional course. It's not like your math and science courses. They can earn up to a credit in this course, depending on the effort they put into it. And they get a certificate of completion at the end. Everything's included. So we have them do a couple assessments in there. I mean, all the supplies, everything they need is included in the fee that we have. But it's a really great course. Like our students love this because they just get so much value, and our parents love it too because we're helping their kiddos be more independent thinkers, more independent adults, all the fun things there, kind of taking that weight off your shoulders a little bit. And we provide a whole separate portion of parent support through this. So we actually do weekly updates to parents via email where we tell you, here's what we were doing last week. Here's how you can help your kiddo this week. Here's what's on the agenda for this week. Here's some resources to help you. And we even do a monthly Q&A with parents where we get on and do like either a little mini training and then open it up to questions. Just to give additional support. And then parents also have a group together as well, so they can kind of talk with each other, get that support. I know sometimes homeschooling can feel very lonely. And being able to surround yourself with other homeschooling mamas is always really helpful. So that's kind of our program. If you're interested, I'm happy to share more information. Right now we do have it it's at our full price now. Our pre-sale and early bird's over, but you can either pay a one-time fee, you can break it up over monthly or weekly payments. And then just some testimonials for you as well, if you wanted to check those out from any of our students and parents that have participated with this program. So it's been a really, really good experience. We love teaching this stuff. This is what we do, kind of helping take some of that lift off of you. So if you're interested, you're welcome to check out the landing page there on the left, and you can sign up right there if you want to grab a seat. If you would like to talk more about it, see if it's a good fit for you and your kiddo, or what other options might be a great fit, you're welcome to schedule a call with us. It is free. I always offer a free strategy call. That's on the right there. If you scan that QR code, it'll take you right to my scheduling link and you can get right on my calendar. And then we can chat more about your needs, your kiddos' needs, the goals that you have, and how we can support you. So again, any questions that you have about the stuff that we just talked about, so about the decision-making process or about the critical thinking process, the adulting program, anything of that nature, any questions I can answer for you. And again, if you're watching the replay, drop your questions in the chat, in the comments there. I am happy. I always go back and check out those. So feel free to drop your questions and I will do my best to answer them. But anybody that's on our live right now that would like to ask any questions. And I'll stop share too, so I can see you and you can see me better. Any questions at all? No questions. Okay, perfect. That's fine. I always like to open it up in case there are any. And like I said, happy to reach out. I do have a fun bias quiz. So if you would like that, let me know. You could drop that in the chat. Just drop bias or drop it. Yeah, drop bias in the chat for me. I will send you the link for the bias quiz I have for your teenager. It's really fun. It's just like, and again, it doesn't cost anything. Just a fun way for them to kind of do a little check-in to see if they can recognize bias and false information. So it's a little quiz you can give your kiddos. It's just 10 questions. It's online. They can just do it and just kind of see where they fall and where they feel like they are for that. So let me know if you want that quiz. I am happy to share that with you, for you to give your teenager to kind of see where they end up being on that spectrum. See if they know as much as they think they do. So let me know if you want that. Again, drop bias in the chat and I will send you that quiz to give to your kiddo. Otherwise, I appreciate you guys so much as always, and I hope this was helpful for you. I hope you learned some techniques and some things that you get to work on with your kiddo to kind of help them navigate this space. Reach out if you have any questions. I will see you all next week. Yes, absolutely. Happy to share the quiz with you for sure. I will message it to you here shortly. Bye.